What's up, vault dwellers? You know, while mainstream studios were making musicals and westerns, there were cinematic outlaws creating movies specifically designed to shock, titillate, and showcase everything conventional theaters they wouldn't touch. They operated with micro budgets and macro ambitions, turning limitations into opportunities for pure, unfiltered weirdness. And today, we're diving into 13 of the most insane exploitation films ever made. The kind that would make your parents immediately revoke your Blockbuster card if they caught you renting them. From talking body parts to Catwoman from space, from bikini beaches to witch covens, these films pushed every boundary they could find. So adjust your tracking, make sure the kids are asleep, and let's explore the beautiful madness of exploitation cinema. Catwoman on the Moon is a 1950s sci-fi classic about a group of astronauts who land on the moon, and guess what? They discover it's inhabited by a civilization of Catwomen who wear black leotards and ballet flats. These lunar felines have telepathic powers, and they haven't seen men in centuries, which, as you know, naturally means they immediately start trying to seduce the male astronauts and plot to steal their spaceship to invade Earth. It's kind of like watching a burlesque show, but better, because it happens on the moon. You know what makes Catwomen of the Moon just so fascinating? It's how it represents early exploitation cinema. I mean, where filmmakers had to be creative with their adult content. In an era where you just couldn't show anything explicit, the film relies on women in tight outfits, doing interpretive dance and exchanging smoldering looks with the astronauts. The special effects consist mainly of obvious miniatures and cave sets that look just like they were constructed in someone's garage over the weekend. It's a proto-feminist sci-fi viewed through a lens of 1950s male anxiety, resulting in something both ridiculous and strangely compelling. Malibu Beach brings us a late 70s teen beach romp, which follows a group of high school graduates enjoying their last summer before college at Malibu Beach. There's a lifeguard who spends more time hitting on girls than saving lives, a mischievous dog trained to remove women's bikini tops, and enough beer and sun to make everyone forget about the plot entirely. It's basically what would happen if you gave a camera to a teenage boy and told him to make his perfect movie. What makes Malibu Beach a quintessential exploitation film is how it perfectly balances the teen comedy formula that would dominate the early 80s. It has just enough story to string together a countless scene of beautiful people in various states of undress playing volleyball, surfing, and some partying. The film's secret weapon, it's Clyde the dog, who steals more bikini tops than there are plot points in the entire movie. Despite its obvious voyeuristic elements, there's a strange innocence to the proceedings. This is exploitation with a sunny disposition, exchanging the grim Grindhouse aesthetics for California sunshine. The film was successful enough to inspire countless imitators, creating a whole subgenre of beach exploitation that thrived for years. It's like someone distilled the entire 1970s California lifestyle into 95 minutes of pure, unfiltered summer fantasy.
Don't be sorry, you'll ruin it if you're sorry. I'm gonna go out and have SwapMeet. I'm gonna kick the butts of some of those kinkos and perverts out there. Teach them to screw around here.
This seemingly innocent comedy about a teenager trying to raise money at a swap meet to fix his father's car hides its exploitation credentials in plain sight. While the main plot follows Siggy's desperate attempt to hustle $250 before his dad's return home, The film's true selling points were the prominent featuring of Penthouse pet Cheryl Rickson. The exploitation elements are cleverly disguised within a film, allowing for maximum marketing potential. Viewers could claim they were watching for the comedy while sneaking peek at Rickson's scenes. The film features surprisingly early cameos from Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman, adding legitimate talent to what's otherwise a transparent vehicle for showcasing Rickson's assets. It's exploitation cinema's version of having your cake and eating it too. A calculated attempt to appeal to both mainstream audiences and those seeking something a bit more entertaining. The Naked Witch is a supernatural nudie cutie from director Larry Buchanan, which follows a college student researching witchcraft who accidentally resurrects a 200-year-old witch. Instead of immediately killing him, which would have made really for a pretty short movie, she seduces him and then embarks on a revenge quest against the descendants of the people who executed her. It's like a supernatural revenge thriller that keeps getting distracted by skinny dipping scenes. Larry Buchanan earned his reputation as the Ed Wood of Texas, with films exactly like this one. This was shot in rural Texas for approximately $8,000. Every corner cut is visible on screen. The resurrection sequences look like someone slowly climbing out of a shallow hole they dug in the backyard, which is probably exactly what it was. Buchanan inadvertently captured a transitional moment in exploitation history with this film, bridging the innocent nudie cuties of the early 60s with the more plot-driven sexploitation to come. The witch spends most of her screen time swimming or wandering through fields, activities clearly chosen to showcase skin rather than advance the narrative. Yet, despite its technical shortcomings, the rural Texas setting creates a uniquely American folk horror atmosphere that feels distinctly different from its contemporary European exploitation. I mean, it's bargain basement witchcraft presented with the earnestness that only a filmmaker with more ambition than resources could deliver.
She's the same as ever. I've got your old room ready, right next to mine.
Hadn't we better let in Susan?
Susan.
My wife.
Oh, I'd forgotten. By all means, let her in.
This difficult film to watch is Seeds of Sin, which is a twisted take on family drama and follows a dysfunctional wealthy family gathering for Christmas with their terminally ill mother. There's incest, drug addiction, repressed homosexuality, and religious mania, all culminating in a series of murders. It's like if Tennessee Williams wrote all about Eve while having a particularly bad acid trip. What makes it so distinctively unpleasant is Milligan's trademark misanthropy. No one makes movies that hate humanity quite like Andy Milligan, and this film is a prime example of his uniquely miserable worldview. This was shot on 16mm with terrible sound and terrible lighting, and the film compensates for its technical shortcomings with pure, unfiltered nastiness. Every character is despicable in their own special way, from the guilt-tripping mother to her variously damaged children. The exploitation elements are less about explicit content, but I mean, there is plenty of that, and more about pushing the boundaries of what subjects could be covered in film at the time. Milligan's background in theater is evident in the stagey performances and dialogue-heavy scenes, creating something that feels like an off-Broadway play that somehow got filmed despite everyone's better judgment. It's a genuinely unpleasant viewing experience that's also completely fascinating as an example of exploitation cinema at its most personal and idiosyncratic.
Another ride on your bike.
Well, you can have a ride on a bike anytime you want. Billy Joe is a perfectly good one.
Yeah, but riding yours is different.
I love this title. Passion in Hot Hollows is a late 60s rural sexploitation that follows a group of hippie-adjacent city folks who get stranded in backwoods community where the locals have some very unusual customs. What starts out as a fish-out-of-water comedy quickly becomes a descent into rustic debauchery as the city slickers are initiated into the local ways. It's kind of like Deliverance, but played for laughs instead of terror. This exploitation subgenre, it thrived on urban paranoia about rural America, painting country folks as both menacing and oddly liberated from social constraints. Watching this film today offers a fascinating glimpse into the counterculture, contradictory attitudes towards rural life, simultaneously mocking it while fetishizing its perceived freedom from urban hang-ups. Technical limitations abound. Grainy 16mm photography, amateur actors clearly reading cue cards, and sets that were, I think, borrowed from unsuspecting property owners. The attempts at humor feel dated and are often cringe-inducing to modern viewers. The film maintains this weird anthropological value as a document of how late 60s filmmakers thought country folks lived. Every frame screams, made by city people who've never actually been to a farm. Hey, speaking of rural customs, there's this strange ritual on YouTube land where viewers tap the like button and subscribe to channels that they enjoy. It's a bit like those city folks who got initiated into country living, except you won't have to frolic in any suspicious hay. If you're digging this tour through Exploitation Cinema's strangest offerings, why don't you join our little community here at Retro Vault? Unlike those hippies who went back to the land, only to immediately regret it, I promise you won't regret subscribing. There are new deep dives into weird movie history every week, because someone needs to preserve these beautiful disasters for future generations.
I devoted myself to research and the compilation of my life's work. The fact that my license to practice has been revoked does not discourage me.
Alright, you and I have an appointment with Dr. Sex, which is an early sexploitation film that follows the questionable treatments methods of Dr. Sex, a therapist whose approach to helping patients with their sexual dysfunction is, let's say, hands-on. The film is structured around a series of therapy sessions, each a bit more outlandish than the last, and they're interspersed with Dr. Sex discussing his techniques with other doctors who seem surprisingly unconcerned about medical ethics. You know what makes Dr. Sex notable? It's its place in the evolution of sexploitation cinema. This was made during a time when films had to at least pretend to be educational to avoid legal trouble. It adopts a pseudoscientific framing that's immediately abandoned whenever the opportunity for a provocative scene arises. Yet, there's just something fascinating about watching filmmakers navigate the rapidly changing censorship landscapes of the mid-60s, using the thinnest veneer to legitimize and push their boundaries. The film's structure, it's essentially a series of loosely connected vignettes, would become a standard format for sexploitation films throughout the decade, allowing filmmakers to maximize the exploitation elements while minimizing the need for coherent plotting.
So you want to be a model?
Yes, I know it won't be easy, but I saved enough money for a course. Can you advise me on the best place to go?
In the meantime, the art photographic job would help you pay your way.
If it's possible.
Virgin Witch is a British exploitation film that follows two sisters who go to a remote country house for a modeling assignment, only to discover it's actually a front for a witch coven seeking new initiates. The head of the modeling agency doubles as the high priestess, using her position to recruit beautiful young women into her occult practices. It's kind of like America's Next Top Model if it had a very dark and very British supernatural twist. What makes Virgin Witch stand out is the exploitation landscape, how it combines multiple exploitation subgenres: modeling industry expose, witchcraft horror, and British sex comedy, into one gloriously ridiculous package. The film takes full advantage of the more permissive censorship in early 70s Britain, featuring numerous ritual sequences that seem designed to primarily showcase nude scenes that would have been impossible in movies just a few years earlier. The witchcraft elements are a mixture of watered-down Wicca and completely made-up Hollywood occultism. Well, and despite all this, there's a certain stylish quality to the film, with atmospheric country house locations and a genuinely eerie soundtrack that occasionally makes you forget you're watching exploitation trash. It's a perfect example of how British exploitation cinema often added a veneer of class to essentially trashy material, resulting in something that's both ridiculous and oddly compelling. You know, speaking of witchcraft, I'm trying to summon some comments for this video. What's the weirdest exploitation film you've ever stumbled across? Maybe something you found in the back room of a video store, or maybe you caught it on 3 a.m. on some cable. Drop your strangest exploitation discoveries below. I need some new material for future videos, and let's be honest, your recommendations are probably more disturbing than anything a YouTube algorithm would suggest. Sharing is caring, especially when it comes to cinematic.
I've got the time, really.
What?
I've got a few minutes, my dear. You know.
4 Dimensions of Greta brings us another British sex comedy, this one in 3D, which follows a man searching for his missing girlfriend, Greta. Encountering various colorful characters who each represent a different side or dimension of her personality. The film was shot in 3D, meaning audiences were treated to countless objects and body parts being thrust directly at the camera. The 3D gimmick wasn't just a technical novelty. It represented exploitation cinema's desperate attempt to compete with mainstream films in the early 70s. As Hollywood began incorporating more adult content, exploitation needed new tricks to get audiences into the seats. The 4 dimensions concept brilliantly solves the anthology problem, allowing for wildly different tones between segments while maintaining a paper-thin connective narrative. British exploitation always carried this strange contradiction, simultaneously prudish and perverted, with characters who discuss sex constantly while seeming deeply uncomfortable with the subject. Technical limitations often work in the film's favor, with the crude 3D effects creating unintentional comedy as random objects protrude from the screen for no narrative reason whatsoever. It's just pure cinematic cheese, delivering with that peculiar British conviction that adding proper accents to trash somehow makes it more sophisticated.
Yes, Mr. the young lady from the agency. May I come in?
The Sexploiters from 1965 is a pioneering exploitation film that masquerades as a documentary expose of the New York City's seedy underbelly, focusing on a ring of blackmailers who photograph unsuspecting women in compromising situations. This was shot in stark black and white on the actual streets of the mid-60s New York. It plays like a film noir that's constantly getting distracted by the opportunity to show women in their underwear. The Sexploiters represents a fascinating transitional moment in exploitation cinema history. This was made in 1965, and it exists precisely at the tipping point between the educational exploitation films of the previous era and the more explicit sexploitation to come. The pseudo-documentary approach, complete with deadpan narration describing the shocking expose we're witnessing, creates this perfect veneer of legitimacy that allowed audiences to pretend they were watching something educational rather than something perverted. What elevates this movie to greatness is how it embodies the exploitation filmmaker's greatest skill, turning limitations into assets. Working with virtually no budget, amateur actors, and primitive equipment, it created something with genuine historical value. A sleazy time capsule of mid-60s New York that captures the city at a pivotal moment between the buttoned-up 50s and the liberated late 60s.
Are you afraid? What are you afraid of?
The devil.
The devil? And what do you perceive the devil to be?
You.
Hellhole brings us a women in prison film with a medical twist. An amnesic woman ends up in a corrupt psychiatric hospital where the sadistic doctor is secretly performing lobotomies and other bizarre experiments on the patients. The hospital has a special punishment area called the Hellhole, where troublesome patients are sent, never to return in the same mental state. It's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest if it was directed by someone whose only direction was just more sleaze. The mid-'80s saw exploitation cinema making its last stand before direct-to-video would just change everything. And Hellhole represents this last gasp with surprising technical competence. Mary Warnow, a cult film royalty from her work with Andy Warhol and Roger Corman, just elevates the material through sheer force of personality as the sadistic Dr. Fletcher. Her performance transforms stock villain lines into something genuinely menacing, creating tensions that lesser actors couldn't achieve with the material. Released by Roger Corman's New World Pictures, the film benefits from their assembly line efficiency. They'd been making exploitation films for so long, they knew exactly how to maximize impact with minimum resources. The experiments depicted hit a sweet spot of being disturbing without venturing into truly unwatchable, using practical effects that combine medical horror with women in prison traditions. Even with a genre known for formula, Hellhole manages to stand out by effectively combining multiple subgenres into one memorable, sleazy package.
In the beginning, you saw me make Madame Rebecca materialize out of thin air. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, I shall do the exact opposite. I shall make this beautiful young lady disappear.
House of 1,000 Dolls stars Vincent Price in this European co-production as a magician whose act is a front for a white slavery ring that kidnaps women during performances and sends them to the house where they are kept as dolls for wealthy clients. The film attempts to balance being a Vincent Price thriller, a Euro crime story, and an exploitation film, resulting in something uniquely strange. It's kind of like Hammer Horror and a 42nd Street Grindhouse film had a baby that was raised by continental art directors. And what makes House of 1,000 Dolls so oddly compelling? It's the clash between Vincent Price's dignified presence and the material. Price brings his customary gravitas to the role, elevating scenes that would just be purely exploitive in lesser hands. Yet the film's European locations, it was shot in Spain, give it a distinct look that separates it from American exploitation of the era, with genuine historic buildings and Mediterranean landscapes providing production value that belies the low budget. The magic show sequences they're just hilariously unconvincing, with Price's character making people disappear through the sophisticated technique of turning the camera off and having them walk away. Despite its lurid subject matter, this film is surprisingly restrained in its depictions, creating a weird tension between its exploitive premise and relatively tame execution. This tension is emblematic of late 60s exploitation cinema, caught between the innocence of earlier eras and the greater explicitness to come. Plus, it features Vincent Price in a cape, which is always worth the price of admission.
I've under me, not over you. That's right, it's me, your own little chatterbox. And listen, Penny, I'm fed up taking it on the chin. Oh my God.
And now to our number one, Chatterbox. In this infamous 1977 comedy, we have a woman who discovers her vagina can talk and sing, leading to a rise in fame as a novelty act, complete with TV appearances and recording contracts. It's exactly as ridiculous as it sounds, with the talking body part, named Virginia, having its own distinctive personality and ambitions. It's kind of like Vagina Monologues was written by a team behind Porky's. What makes Chatterbox so just bizarrely fascinating is how it takes an outrageous premise and treats it with casual acceptance of a standard sitcom. After the initial shock, characters adapt to the situation with just remarkable speed, turning what could have been a one-joke premise into a surprisingly effective satire of exploitation and commodification. The film walks this thin line between exploitation itself and then commenting on it, with the main character essentially being exploited for her unusual conditions by agents and doctors and entertainment executives. The director, who had a background in adult films, brings a surprisingly light touch to the material, creating something that's certainly tasteless, but never quite as crude as the premise suggests. The film also features musical numbers, there's singing involved, that have to be seen to be believed. You notice I didn't say heard. It's exploitation cinema at its most creative and absurd, taking a concept that sounds like a juvenile joke and just somehow stretching it into a feature film that's actually entertaining. Exploitation cinema gave us some of the most creative, bizarre, and boundary-pushing films in history. Made with more imagination than budget, these beautiful disasters remind us of an era when filmmakers, they weren't constrained by focus groups or franchise potential. Just a need to get butts in seats with the promise of something you couldn't see anywhere else. The death of Grindhouse theater and the rise of home videos eventually killed the classic exploitation film, as audiences could suddenly watch adult content in the privacy of their own homes. But the spirit of exploitation cinema, it lives on in midnight movies, cult classics, and filmmakers who still believe that sometimes the best way to make art is to proudly embrace the trashy, the taboo, and the tasteless. But before you go and just start scrolling through streaming services or other channels, complaining there's nothing to watch, remember there's more exploitation cinema right here on this channel. Just maybe use a private browsing window, for old time's sake. And keep it weird, folks.